Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, according to your time zone. There was once an American novelist who wrote that the goal isn't to live forever, it is to create something that will live forever. Today, we as a broadcaster, whenever we produce something, we always think that okay, someone maybe in 20 years, 30 years, someone will see our product and see that wow, it was a nice program. Archives depicts culture, richness, time, the values, and this is what we are talking about today in our webinar, latest trends of visual archives and digitization. We have a very experienced lineup of speakers today, and hopefully you will be enjoying and learning a lot about this technique and various strategies. But before I continue, I would like to invite Miss Philomena to come and open her mic and say her opening remarks. Miss Philomena,
Thank
director
you.
here.
Thank you very much, Nabil. And I'd like to start off by saying thank you to everyone who has joined us today. We're joined by people from Asia Pacific region. We have people from SAARC, ASEAN. We also have members from Nigeria and also the Pacific Islands joining us. So really grateful that all of you are making time for this webinar, and this seems to be a mode of communication right now. And I think it's wonderful that multi-platforms have opened up and we're able to do this good work. For AIBD, I think we have seen what COVID-19 has done. And in our dialogues with many of our members, both radio and television stations, the biggest issue that was being faced by all media organizations was the issue of content. And I think there was lack of content. That's what we're talking about. So I still remember my colleagues in Pacific who were saying, you know, Philo, we have no content and we are actually resorting to, we have exhausted whatever we have and we actually have to take it from other sources. Can you please help us? So actually AIBD jumped on the bandwagon, and what we did was we started a content sharing initiative. And we're very, very grateful to most of our members, India, China, and then we also had lots of content from Australia, from Russia, so and also South America. A lot of Latin American partners actually gave us a lot of content, and this content in Korea also, and we've been sharing this content with all our members in the Asia Pacific region. But what is evident is that many of us are not prepared for a huge disaster like COVID-19, right? Because we never expected the world to come to a standstill. We never expected a lockdown situation. So perhaps this webinar would open the minds of every one of us broadcasters and perhaps tell us and reinstate the importance of archiving and you know, how important it is to keep content and the way we keep content so that it becomes a rich resource that can be utilized during difficult times. So today I'm really grateful that I'm joined by experts, Adrian Wood, I've heard his name multiple times, where archiving and you know, keeping materials is concerned, and also Mr. Jan Muller, and not forgetting my good friend, Mr. Ali Raza, who has agreed to share his expertise as well, right? And also all of the members who joined us today, the participants from various countries. I hope that this webinar would be interesting and you have something great to take home, and perhaps we learn something new and are prepared for not another disaster, but well prepared in preserving our data and our material so that it becomes useful and you know, we will not be lack of it, right? Thank you. So it's back to you, Nabil.
Thank you very much, Ms. Philomena. And now I would like to ask Mr. Syed Ali Raza to open his mic, but before that, I would like to introduce him formally. Mr. Ali Raza is the director of Whiteways Communication. Just a moment. A thought leader and visionary Whiteways is a leading system integration company focused on providing solutions to broadcast houses. Prior to founding Whiteways, Ale Raza was head of South Asia and emerging markets for Kit Digital Inc. So, Mr. Ale Raza, over to you, and
Thank
you will
you.
be presenting the presentation on the workflow of archiving. Sir.
Thank you. So thank you so much. I'd like to take off from your first remarks. And I'd like to tell, before I start the presentation, let me tell the short story. I went to Mauritius. So one of the most beautiful islands in the Indian Ocean. And when I was returning from there, I thought, okay, let me take a small souvenir. So I said, okay, so what's there in Mauritius that we can't find anywhere else in the world? Fair question, right? So the sales lady gave me a small little box with a little bit of sand in it. So I said, sand? I mean, are you sure? What's so great about the sand? She said, oh, this is something that you cannot get anywhere else in the world. So I said, what is it? Apparently, it was the footsteps of Dodo, the dead bird. So in Mauritius, you can get the footsteps of the dodo bird for $100. I mean, I was, I didn't buy it, frankly, but the point that this whole thing drove home was that once it is extinct, once the dodo bird is extinct, all you get is the footsteps of the dodo bird in the sand. And frankly, I was not even sure whether it was the actual footsteps of the bird or not. Somebody could have just made something on the sand. So once my point is that once it's all gone, it's all gone, unless we find a way to save it somehow. So that's what I think this seminar is all about, to try to save a slice of our history, to save a slice of the music, language, culture, and so on and so forth for posterity, for our children, grandchildren, and so on. We don't know who is going to survive till when, especially this pandemic brings home that point very clearly. We don't know how long we'll survive. But we need to record the time that we had on this planet and save it for the future. So that's what that's what it's all about. Right, sir. So with that, let me get on to the presentation. I hope is it possible to put on the slides, Naveed?
Just a moment.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay. So as Nabil mentioned, we are a system integration company. So we were approached by a very high-end body. I'm not allowed to say their names because we had to sign a non-disclosure. So I'm sorry, I will not be able to tell who that company was. But they involved us in a project where they had a huge amount of audio video assets, which were very, very dear to them. And they wanted to find a way to save it for posterity, for their children, grandchildren. So we'll share this case study of what we went through, what are the problems we faced, what are the issues that we faced, how did we solve it, what could be done to solve it, what could be done better now that we've learned a lot from this project. And this project continued for more than a year. So over the whole year, we were able to get a lot of lessons from the project. And it was, so I'd like to share those lessons with the rest of everybody. Okay. So we usually do a full turnkey solution. We just don't sell a piece of equipment and walk away. We do a turnkey solution, means that we will take responsibility for the whole thing. We set up a system. We will then install it. We'll commission it. We'll make sure it works properly. We'll provide training, and then after that, we'll provide after the support. So, I mean, the responsibility, the onus of making sure that the project succeeds is with us. So we have to be very, very careful. We have to be very involved. We need to understand exactly what the objectives of the customer are and make sure that we meet those objectives. So, sorry about that. Yeah, Navid. Next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can skip this. Okay, so there were certain things we were very clear when we were discussing with the customers that there were certain things that you will take care of, and there were certain things that you will not take care of. So, like for example, we were not involved in the building design, architecture, interiors, and all that, and we will not be responsible for the office systems and networks and internet and all that. So those were out of scope. One mistake we made, we told them that the security systems are out of scope. We should have kept it in scope because it turned out that it was quite important to have the right security systems in place. Hardware as well as software as well as physical CCTV cameras and NVR and all those things. But anyway, so that was how it is. Yeah. Yeah, so when we landed in that place, we went through a whole pile of tapes stored in, well, not so good conditions, frankly. And we sort of separated all the different types of tapes and did a whole pile of work in compiling a list of what kind of tapes were there, what was the condition of the tape, and even wrote on in a notebook on what was written on physically on the tape, because most of the tapes had a sticker on side on the outside of the tape, and they had written a lot of made a lot of writings on the outside of the tape. So we wanted to capture all that data because that was the only way we could find out who had shot this, what was the date on which it was shot, and who's belongs to this department, and so on and so forth. So we had to make a list of all the tapes, and here's a, summary of the list. It's not the full list, but the summary of the list. And then we had to note down everything that was written on all the different tapes and find out how many were working, how many were not working, what were the problems with each one of them. So it was a very difficult, very time-consuming, very manpower intensive job. But hey, it's got to be done. It's got to be done. And at the end, we found in a corner, sitting in a corner, was 2,000 DVD masters. So, good thing is that they had left some writings on each one of the DVDs, so we could clearly understand that what this DVD was all about. And of course, many of the DVDs did not work at all. So, there was nothing that we could do about it. Very sad. But the majority of the DVDs did work. So we were able to copy all those videos from the DVD onto the hard disk and, make the best out of it. So this is the first step, that we need to make a list, count, and make a database, sort of an initial database of what we have, what we want to archive. I think this is the first step. Yeah. No, this one. So we sat down with them and had a discussion. So before we start the ingest of the tape, we need to do a lot of preparation and physical restoration. Preparation means preparing the tape to go into the VTR and read what is there on the tape. So many of the tapes were jam. There were a lot of which had fungus, which had dirt on it, which had obviously gone through some moisture and so on and so forth. So many of the tapes were in a very, very bad shape. So then we spent actually a lot of time on understanding how we need to treat the tapes. So all tapes cannot be treated equally, and I'll cover this more in the future slides. But this turned out to be one of the most learning experiences for us, because we had no idea that how to restore the tape, what to do to make the fungus go away, what to do to dry the tape from moisture that had accumulated on it, and so on and so forth. So once the tapes were ready, then we went into ingest, then we grabbed the metadata, then we transcoded, then we did a QC, quality check, software restoration, finishing an upgrade, because many of the, once you do the restoration, then you find that the tape is in a really bad shape. So that we'll cover in another section. And then we had to make sure that we store it in such a way that for the next 20, 30, at least for the next 20, 30 years, it's safe and it can be retrieved whenever we need it for, you know, for a program or something like that. So at each stage, we had to take some very important, very key critical decisions. And as we go along the presentation, I will try to explain what those decisions were that we had to take. And I mean, I can't give you all the answers, but I will certainly give you all the questions so that you know what you will go through. And once you go down this journey, you will also be faced with all these questions, and you need to find a way to, I mean, you need to find the answers for yourself. And I believe that one answer does not fit all. I believe that there is no silver bullet. I can't tell you something that, okay, why don't you use this particular format or the house format, and that be the right one, that be the right answer for everybody. That's not possible. So each one of you has to answer those questions in your own way. And we'll try to tell you our experiences as we go along. Yes, sir. Right. So this is the actual workflow. We are starting with the actual workflow. So it's a summary of what we had to go through. Tapes were inspected, tagged, and treated using physical restoration techniques. So these, what are the physical restoration techniques? That's another different topic. And it's such a big topic that it can't be covered in this particular, maybe we can have a separate session later on how to treat the tapes and how to bring them back from, you know, from the death's doorstep or something like that. When the tape is ingested using Adobe Premiere, they are manually checked, quality, you know, delete the black frames and so on. Metadata. So the third was metadata. Metadata is very difficult. It's a very complicated, very difficult question to answer. Either you make the metadata too detailed, then the database becomes too big to manage and it becomes very difficult, or you don't capture enough about each video clip that is going into the database, and therefore it becomes very difficult to search and retrieve. So it's got to be a balance, but again, it's a very complicated question. And as we go through, I'll try to bring up all the questions that we faced. So then after that, we decided that all the clips have to be in one format, one single format, so that they can be searched and retrieved. They can be stored in a single format. What is that format? Another very difficult question. I will certainly tell you all the questions, and I really don't know what the answer is, even today. QC is mandatory. I think it has to be performed. Again, there are many ways of doing it. Some quick ways, some very detailed, thorough ways, you know, depending on the importance and of the video that you are performing the QC on. Then we went through the color correction and restoration. So color correction, why? Because in one, I mean, if you look at a video, for example, I'm wearing a blue shirt. In the next frame, I'm wearing a purple shirt, and in the next frame, I'm wearing a green shirt. So to a viewer who's watching the clip, it becomes very unsettling to, you know, see the color change. So therefore, it is essential that we do some kind of color correction. Restoration we'll cover in a later, I mean, after the break, there's another session for restoration. So we'll do a quick checkup on restoration. Then the finished clips, how do we store it? Do we store it on disk? Do we store it on tape? Do we store it on optical disk? Where do we store it? So that's another great question. And then, you know, like Ms. Philo mentioned in the beginning, we have to be ready for all kinds of disasters. So if you archive the clip in one place, and God forbid if something happens, like a flood or an earthquake or something, then all the archives are gone. So, I mean, so you need to store it in a way that even if a big disaster happens, you still get to save, you know, all the archive clips. So those were this is a summary of the workflow of all the questions that we went through. Now I'll go into each step in greater detail so that you understand the complexities. Yes, sir. Right. So as I mentioned, the tapes are tagged and the information was noted in the database. So one question that came up at this point was, once we have ingested the tape into the hard disk, what do we do with the old tapes? Do we keep it or do we throw it away or do we destroy it? I mean, what do we do with it? In this particular case, the client decided to make a special room for the old tapes and store them safely because he just could not bear to destroy them. I mean, but I'm not sure whether that's the right way to do it, but you've got to do something with the old tapes, you know. You can't just throw it away in the dustbin because somebody might copy it, or that may not be. So either you keep it or you destroy it. Okay, then we had to inspect the tapes for damage, fungus, moisture, other problems. The tapes were treated, as I mentioned earlier, in a separate department, which had all the treatment facilities to treat the tapes. And frankly speaking, we could save a small fraction of the tapes by treating them, but the rest of them were beyond any hope. So we just had to throw it away. And the client was heartbroken because he could not save many of the tapes, but hey, such is life, you know, you can't do much. So we had to do some baking, we had to do rewinding, we had to, you know, do a lot of things to the tape to make it ready for ingest. There were some tapes that were extremely valuable. We were told that no matter what happens, you cannot let go of these tapes. So we tried our best to find a way to get the video off the tape. And honestly speaking, only a few of them could be saved, but the rest of them could not be saved, and we had to let them go. So for ingesting, there was another problem that there were no VTRs available. So for some of the different types of tape, the VTRs were just not available. So then we had to go all over the world and find some old VTRs. And in the end, what we managed to do is to get some VTRs and find that, okay, everything is working in the VTR except the head. So we took the head from another one of the VTRs and put it in this one. And so at least we had one properly working VTR, which could be used for ingest. So we had to sort of think out of the box to make it work. So if you have, I mean, what I can say is that if you have a lot of old U-matic tapes or Betamax or Betacam and all those things, 1 inch, 2 inch, etc., then you better start looking for the VTRs right away, because the number of such VTRs is dwindling, and very soon there will come a time where no VTR is available. So you have tapes which you want to ingest, but you can't ingest it at all simply because the VTRs are not available. So please start scrambling immediately. That's my message to all the people who have a lot of old tape but don't have the VTRs. Yes, sir. Okay, so we found a device from Matrox. It was called Matrox MXO LE. So the good thing about this device is that it had all the connections. It had HDMI, XLR, RCA, Genlock, analog component, SDI, YC, everything that you can think of. So we use this VTR. We use this device. We connected the device to this. We connected the VTR to this device, and we connected this device to the nonlinear editing system. So we could use this device for multiple different kinds of VTRs. So even if it's an old VTR and all they have is YC or a composite, we could still use this particular device. So it turned out to be really very handy. Unfortunately, now even this device, Matrox has stopped manufacturing this device as well. So if you are thinking about ingesting thousands of tapes, then maybe we'll have to find some other device which can do something similar. Or maybe we can find some old MXO LE device in the market which could be used. But even this is running out of stock very fast. So yeah, thanks. So we decided, the client decided actually to go with Adobe Premiere. At that time it was CS6, I believe. They moved on to the new generation, and we could ingest on it, we could preview, we could edit, we could correct the audio, we could do trimming, we could do quality check, we could add transitions, visual effects, etc., etc. We could do a whole pile of things using Adobe. And we could easily find the manpower who were familiar with Adobe, and the people who were not familiar, we could train them, because the trainers were there. We had some trainers who were certified by Adobe, and we managed to train the rest of them. So they had a whole pile of like 10, 12 people sitting on editing systems, and they were all working day in and day out, like on a rotating shift. And they were doing all sorts of things. And it was very exciting because, you know, they found some old slave which they were looking for, and it suddenly became like a festival. Oh, we managed to save this slave. I mean, most of the time it was a very happy environment, because you were saving some of the very, very precious videos that were, you know, that would have been lost had we not gone through this whole process. Okay, so once we ingest, then we need to tag it with the metadata. So each video had to be tagged with the metadata, and of course that metadata has to be a unique ID, clip ID, which will be attached to the clip forever. You can never remove the metadata from the clip, and that unique ID will be used to search and retrieve the clip. And along with the unique ID, we had to make a metadata structure. So the metadata structure, making that metadata structure became very, I mean, there were a lot of time spent, and there were a lot of arguments and all that. What I would suggest is that when you are building the metadata structure for yourself, please involve the different departments in the television or radio channel, because news, you know, is a different genre, and you have entertainment, you have music, you have, you know, so many different kinds of talk shows and so on and so forth. So if you involve all the departments, and if they give feedback, and then you decide the metadata structure, I think it's much better. Second thing is that there's a tendency among people to include every small little detail in the metadata. For example, somebody suggested that you even include the color of the clothes that the person is wearing. In my opinion, we cannot go to that extent, primarily because then the database becomes very huge, and it becomes very difficult to manage. Secondly, nobody searches that, oh, this guy wearing blue shirt. Nobody searches like that. I mean, usually people search by date, or they search by keywords, or they search by genre, but nobody searches. So we have to understand how people search and prepare the metadata accordingly. But a lot of effort and focus has to go into building the right metadata structure, and making sure that the benchmark that we set was that in 3 searches, if you're searching for a particular video clip, then if you put 3 to 4 parameters, then that should lead you to where the video is. So you can search and retrieve the video. If you need to do more than 3 searches, more than 3 parameters to do the search, then obviously the metadata is not that good. So the sort of benchmark that we used, I mean, maybe you can use a different benchmark, but so a lot of thought, a lot of discussion has to go into building the metadata. We can give you our opinions and our experiences, but at the end of the day, the metadata has to be different for each organization, because each organization is very unique, it's different. So you cannot take the metadata structure of one organization and copy paste to another. That will not work, right? Okay, then after tagging each video with the metadata, we had to convert all the different kinds of clips into one single format. Why did we have to do that? Because we wanted to store all the files in one single format so that they can be searched and retrieved in one huge single database, So you can go into the database, search and retrieve the clip. So now we have to come to a decision on what should that format be. We call it the house format. So again, there was a lot of discussion, there were a lot of experimentation that went into it. So we had to take some clips and convert it into, let's say we are thinking to put it in, the house format will be A. So we tried to take some clips and convert it to A to see how does it look like. Is there a quality degradation? Is there a quality loss? And we found that, yeah, in some cases there was a very serious degradation taking place. So obviously that was not the right format. Secondly, people had this tendency that why don't we go with XTCam, or why don't we go with P2, or why don't we go with one of the camera formats? It's easy. The video is already in that camera format. We don't even have to convert. So again, the issue with that is that XTCam is a Sony format, and Sony has already moved on to a new different format, which is XAVC. So in some time, in some years, maybe a few years, XTCam format will die. Same thing for P2, same thing for any other AVID or any other proprietary format. There is one company that has built that particular format. They will continue to support it for some period of time. After that, they'll let it go and they'll move on and come up with a separate format. Then what happens? So then you'll be faced with a situation where you have converted everything into a particular file format, and then that file format is outdated and you are not even able to open that file. So in fact, there was a client who had converted all the files into a very old format, and they came to us and said that, hey, now we can't even open those files. So it's a disaster. It's really a very big disaster. So you have to think about what format you're going to use and convert. And you have to be aware that this format will be there for another 10, 20 years maximum. After that, you have to, again, convert into some other new format which is available at that time, 20 years down the line, which we don't know today. One format that seemed to be taking everybody's fancies some years ago was the JPEG 2000. It was a great format, but it had some other issues and problems. So because of which it's not possible for everybody to make JPEG 2000 as their house format. So even that answer went away. So, and the other thing about formats is that there's one set of formats that can be used for standard definition, and there's the same format can't be used for high definition. Similarly, in audio, there are again, a large number of formats that are available. You got to make the right choices so that you don't lose quality, so that format is available. And it's not a proprietary format. If it's a proprietary format, then you are dependent on only one company that is supporting it, and sooner or later it's going to die. So what if that company closes down, shuts down? So this is a very difficult question, and I can't give you. If you ask me today, what is the house format that I should use, I can't give you the right answer. And the third thing is that for each organization is different. It's unique, so they have to search for their own answers. We can give suggestions, we can help, we can share our experiences, but at the end of the day, the organization has to come up with their own answers. I mean, there's no silver bullet. So the next thing, the next question that we found was even more difficult. So this took a long time for them to come up with the house format. And then once you have chosen the format, then all the clips that have come into Adobe Premiere in different formats had to be converted into one single house format, and so that the whole database is similar. They all contain the same kind of file, so it's easy to search and retrieve. The second problem that we faced was that we had to, no, next one, Nabil. After that. Yep. So, okay, so once we had converted the files to our preferred host format, then we decided to check some of the key important files manually to see how, what's the quality now. And we found that many of the clips had problems. Some had a jitter, some had a lip sync problem. I mean, the audio video is not matching. Some had a lot of black frames, some had color correction issues. I mean, you name it, some had, bleeding, the colors were bleeding in some of the clips, some of the videos, etc., etc. So then we decided that we'll do the inspection, and during the inspection, if some clips are good quality, we are happy with it, it's all fine, then we move it to the database to be archived. The clips that were not okay, who had some of these problems, they were put in a different bin, and then they had to be sent for color correction or restoration, which I'll cover later. So then those clips had to be treated separately, and they had to be sent, they had to be restored, and they had to be color corrected, and then they were sent to the archive. So, yes, sir. So, color grading and color correction turned out to be a lot more difficult than we initially thought. So after trying a number of software and all that, we came to this company from Austria. It was a small little company which does restoration. It was called Diamond. And we tried the software. Later on, I'll show you, later in the show, in the other presentation, I'll try to show you what they can do. And they were really, I mean, some of the stuff that they can do is like magic. They restored some of the videos. Amazing. Not just the black and white videos, but also the color ones where they were able to do a great job. So there are two ways of doing it. One is a batch process where we select a whole bunch of clips and we pass them through the system, so that, and they do it automatically. So after doing a few passes, then we again do a QC on the clip, and we find that okay, some, at least 75% of the problems have been solved, but there's still some, 2-3 problems that have not been solved. So those problems we had to go frame by frame. So we had to go to each frame and clean up the frame, then go to the next frame, clean up the frame, go to the next. So, and when you see there are 25 frames a second, so it was a lot of very detailed, and I believe even after a few years, even now, the work is going on. And it's very, very difficult, very draining, very tiring, very, repeated sort of work. But for clips that are very important, very critical, it has to be done. So even now they're doing it. So again, I will not go into great details at this time. We will later on cover this topic in more detail. I'll actually show you a video clip where you can see a bad quality clip and how it is cleaned and what it looks after the quality is removed. So it's not easy, but it's got to be done. So after the automatic processes are complete, the technicians will use the interactive mode to work on the individual frames, as I told you. And this includes dirt and speckle removal. So you have a region of interest. In the frame, there is one part of the frame which is very disturbed. So you need to clean up, go to each frame, go to that part of the picture and clean up that part of the picture. So luminance, clone, paint, splice damage, cadence issues, all that can be reviewed and repaired. So, I mean, it's pretty good. The software does a great job, really. And majority of the videos were brought to a point where they could have been shown as a standard definition clip in a broadcast environment. Of course, we could not save all of them, but I would say that majority of the clips could be restored using this software. So for the color correction and color grading, we went for Davinci Resolve. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Davinci. It's a very famous, and it has a, and why we went to Davinci, because it has one of the most advanced color correction systems in the world, with the professional multi-track editing. So you can edit, color correct, finish, deliver all from one system. And we use several such systems from Davinci Resolve, and again, it could do wonders. I mean, there were clips where in one frame it appeared as white, and in the next frame the same shirt is appearing as black. But when after doing the color correction, the quality was really very, very appreciable, and a lot of people appreciated what Resolve could do for them. And frankly, it is not very expensive. The other color correction systems are extremely expensive and difficult, and you have to pay a maintenance fee and all that. But this was pretty cheap, and I don't remember anybody paying any maintenance fees. So yeah, pretty good. Yes, sir. Yeah, so this is about the color correction. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Davinci. And again, color is a huge topic. It's very, very detailed and very thorough. So color is a different topic altogether. You know, maybe we need to hold a separate session for color itself, just the color part of the video. So I don't think I have the time to go into color at the moment. At some point, I think we need to cover this topic separately. Nabil? Okay, then next question was that how do we, for how much storage do we need? To store all these tapes, how much storage do we need? So we took how many tapes we had, how much video in each tape, 45 minutes. So total number of minutes, so much, then that means so many hours, that means so many, this is the approximate file size per hour. So we need a storage of so much. So we calculated all that and came to a conclusion that we needed about, I think, a few terabytes of storage. And so which means that we need to plan to have that kind of storage in an online mode and as well as an offline mode. So we put together a storage, and then of course it's not just a storage. It has to have it has to be a storage which is very stable, very strong, because once we are storing all the clips in this particular storage, and if something happens to it, then all the data will go away. So that was not an option. So we had to. Okay, next one, sir. So along with the archive storage, since they were producing videos regularly, they felt that they should not just have a storage for archival, they should also add in the storage for their ongoing videos that they kept producing from day to day. So we had to add all that up, and it turned out that for 1 year, the storage capacity that they needed was 20 TB. So one would think that 20 TB is a lot, but it's actually not. It's a very small storage, no big deal. And usually we need to make sure that the entire storage is never full, can never be full. So we had to take into account the fact that 25% of the storage will always be empty. So the overhead is 25%. So only 75% of the storage, maximum is 75% of storage can be full. 25% has to be empty at all times. So when we plan the storage, then we need to make sure that this is in place. I mean, this planning parameter is in place, and then plan the storage accordingly. The other thing about the storage is that what kind of RAID do you want? Do you want RAID 5, RAID 6, RAID 10, RAID 20? What kind of RAID do you want? So depending on the RAID, your storage the amount of space you have for files will increase and decrease accordingly, according to the RAID that you see. The third thing was that this particular client decided that, okay, we will have a box in which will be the storage box in which all the videos will reside. But if something happens to this box, it's all gone. So they decided to have a backup. So the storage, all the files were going into one clip, and they were then automatically copied into a separate box, which was exactly the same mirror image of this first box. So in case something happened to one box, then there's a copy left on the other boxes. So always backup, backup, backup. So in the end, we ended up having a 500 TB storage box and a backup of another 500 TB. So pretty huge storage, if you ask me. Yes, sir. Okay, so to track all these things happening, so if you can see, there's a lot of activity that has happened to a particular clip from the time when it was sitting in a tape in the warehouse to the time that it has come now. There's a lot of activities happened with it. So we used a media set management system to track each and every clip, to understand what was happening to each clip, to store the metadata in the MAM database, to search and retrieve each one of the clips. So we had, the question that arose is, which media set management should we use, which is the best one? So we went to a number of well-known companies like Dale and several others, and we went through the systems. And at that time, we found that a majority of the media set management systems were not meant for only just the archival part. Most of the media set management systems were meant for the whole workflow, for a whole television workflow where you have news production, you have program production, and so on, and you have a master control room, and you have an automation system, and you have, the whole jing bang. And what we wanted was just the part where it will, it will take care of the archival. And we wanted the media set management to work exactly as per the workflow that we had designed. And we kept on searching and searching. Finally, we found one small little company from UK. It was called TVT. They had a system which worked almost exactly the way we were working. So with some customization and all that. So the choice, I believe that this system is not available anymore. So the choice of which media set management to use for just the archiving purposes is another difficult choice, which needs to be made very carefully, because either you'll end up spending a huge amount of money, or you will get a system which doesn't work according to you, but you have to work according to them, which is not a good idea. So, it's not easy to find the right solution for your workflow, and it's not easy to find the right solution for your size and scale of operations, because some of the size and scale of operations are extremely big, and the databases cannot support those scale of operations. So they could very quickly understand that, oh my God, this database cannot, have the scale that that my operation requires. So it's another difficult choice which needs to be made very, very carefully after checking a number of systems that are available. And once you make a choice, you have to live with it. So it's not easy to make a change in your choice. If you've chosen a MAM and you start working with it, you paid them a lot of money, and you then find that, oh, it's not the right choice, then it's very difficult to make a U-turn and go back. So that's the reason why I'm emphasizing that you need to really think very long and very hard before you finally decide to go with a particular media set management. Yes, sir. So our workflow management systems were programmed for change. It was tailored to our requirements. We apply the root workflows, which I just described, of course, in a lot more detail, to fit with the media asset management system that we were using. And it allowed us to view exactly what was going on at some point in time. It gave us a lot of reports. It generated a lot of reports. it told us a lot of things that were going on. For example, we may have been spending too much time on one particular process and not spending too much time on another process. It also told us that, okay, this particular editor his work is very small, very less, whereas the editor sitting next to him is doing, like 3 times or 4 times the work that he's doing, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole pile of things that came out after we implemented the system, and it was very, very essential. It really helped us a lot to fine tune the workflow, to fine tune the people, to fine tune the systems that we had, and make it better as we go along. So it really, and my point is that if you have the right media asset management system, it becomes a big friend of yours, and it really helps you a lot in making sure that the work is done properly. So another very important choice that you need to make. Yes, sir. Okay, then we had now started putting all the videos in the hard disk. So we had a storage box, and all the videos were, after doing the color correction, after doing the restoration, we were putting all the clips onto the hard disk. It had a metadata attached to it, and it had a, so it was all working great. But obviously, it's not possible to store the video on a hard disk box forever and ever for the next 20, 30 years. That's not an option. So we had to move the video from the hard disk into a medium, into some other medium. And the question that arose at that time was, which medium? Should it go? So they considered optical drive. First, they considered optical drive. So then we heard some stories about some other companies who had done their storage in optical drives, and that company shut down. So they had all the huge amounts of video stored in optical drives, but now they didn't have the drive to read those optical discs. So it was it was a disaster for them. So that was the reason why this company decided that no, we cannot go into a situation where we put everything on an optical drive and then find that, oh, we can't even read those optical drives. It's a disaster. So then, after a lot of searching, after a lot of discussion, after a lot of research, we all sat down and decided that let's go with LTO. Why LTO? Because it's not backed by any one company. I think there are many, like HP, Sony, Fuji Film, and so on. There are like 6 or 7 companies that are involved with LTO. And there's a whole lot of LTOs, thousands and thousands of LTOs being used all over the world by a whole pile of companies. So there's some safety numbers, shall I say. And it is at least, it is backward compatible to some extent. I mean, LTO 6 can read LTO 5 tapes. So if you have a LTO 6 drive, it can read LTO 5 tapes. It cannot read LTO 2 tapes, but it can read LTO 5 tapes. So to some extent, there's some backward capability, compatibility there. And we talked to some people who had put their videos in LTO, and they assured us that for 10 years at least, you can still readable. I mean, the tapes are still readable. So, I mean, keeping everything else in mind, after looking at all the different vendors and all the different systems available, we thought that this was the best one. So at that time, it was LTO 6 was the going one at that time. I believe now it's going on to LTO 8 or LTO 9. So one LTO 6 cartridge can hold up to 6.25 GB of data, which makes it the cheapest medium for holding data. And it was very popular. We were told that more than 150 million of LTO 6 tapes were sold, so there is safety numbers, as I told you. And they have a long shelf life, and etc. And most of there were a number of companies that were building LTO drives and robotic tape drives and so on and so forth. So we thought that at the moment, this seemed to be the best alternative. So let's go with that. So we went with LTO 6. I believe even now they are on LTO6. So the other thing, good thing about LTO is that it has a robotic archive system, which means that if you can tell the LTO that, hey, this is the metadata, please fetch me this file, then the robotic arm knows which disk is holding this particular video, and they will retrieve it for you and they'll give it to you. So you don't need to know that, okay, this video number so and so is in file, is in tape number so and so on and so forth. You don't need to know all this. All the data stored with the LTO disk, LTO archive system, and all you need to tell them is to please fetch me this, and the system will fetch it for you. So it's very easy, and so for this particular client, we used a company called Zendata. They had a product called SX10 archive appliance, which consists of an HP LTO library with 2 LTO6 drives, 1 mail slot and 23 active slots. So we used that system, and because it was a smaller archive system, so it was sufficient for them, for their requirements. So we ended up using this, and I believe it worked pretty well, and there was no, we haven't heard of any problems till now. Touch wood. So if you have a bigger system, then obviously this is not suitable for you. You need to have a bigger robotic tape library because the number of LTOs that you have is much higher or much bigger. So again, it has to be the scope and scale of the project has to be seen, and then a decision needs to be taken on what kind of LTO tape library is required. Right? Yes, sir. So then the customer was very, very careful, is that after going through all this work, after retrieving all the tapes and after making sure that they are safe and after spending such a lot of time and effort and money, it should not happen that some one event happens and everything's gone. So they decided that they will archive in 2 LTO tapes, master, the main, and backup. And they will be, each tape will be stored in 2 separate places, in 2 separate buildings on 2 separate locations, so that in case something happens to one building, one location, then the other one is still safe and that can be used. So they decided to do some disaster recovery. Yeah. And this is a small system diagram that we've put together. So we have the, as you can see, we have the media asset management, MAM operator. We had the QC, we had the MAM databases, we had the transcoding systems, we had the ingest systems. In the middle, we have the storage, the hard disk storage, and we had the archive system. So, and of course, all of them are connected by Ethernet and all controlled by the media asset management system. So small system, easy to, not too complicated, not too difficult, but it has to be done properly. It has to be tested properly so that it keeps on working for years and years and years. And of course, proper industrial grade systems need to be used. Otherwise, if you use cheaper machines and cheaper systems, then they go down very often, and you are left with having to call the system integrator again and again, and that's not a nice thing to do. So now the next, so this was the project. This was the description of what we did and all the issues that we faced and all the problems that we went through. After that, the client said, okay, now I have all my videos. I have archived them. I have restored them. They are all looking fabulous, fantastic. I'm very happy. Now I need to make sure that if somebody steals it, then there's something on each tape, on each video, which tells the viewer that this video belongs to us. We are the owner of this particular video. So at that time, we were faced with another solution, that there were 2 ways of doing it. Either we could go for a DRM system, or we could go for watermarking. So this was another long discussion and another difficult decision that we had to make, primarily because there was a lot of cost involved. Watermarking, DRM systems are not cheap. They are extremely expensive, and they're difficult to maintain, and so on and so forth. whereas the watermarking was, compared to DRM, they were cheaper. So next one, Nabil. Next slide. Yeah. Yeah. So this is you guys can read on the screen. I hope it's a few slides, few lines about what a digital rights management system can do. Encrypts the content so that the device information is there. So only the target user and device can decrypt the file. The others can't see it at all. The problem, as I told you, is that it's a complicated system, DRM, and it's a costly system, difficult to maintain also. So the other option we had was to watermark it. Can you go to the next one? Yeah, so watermarking. So digital watermarking is used to copy control and identification tracing, protecting the content rights owners. So it deposits a unique description of the original to a neutral registration authority. So then the registration authority allots a unique identification number to the content and archives these two for final reference. So the unique ID is also conveyed to the content owner. The digital watermarking is secure and secretly merged with only the content itself. So it is so it can't be, so if somebody steals it, then he can't view the content at all, and the digital authority will get to know who is trying to view it. So it's a bit difficult to break. I mean, not that people have not broken it; it has been broken, but very difficult to break. And this seemed to be a better way of protecting your content rather than digital rights management. And of course, this came at a much cheaper, much lower price. So the client wanted to go through the watermarking route. But then again, it depends on you. If you are making a film which is worth millions of dollars, then you may not want to go down this road. You may want to stick to digital rights management system. So it depends on what kind of content you have, what's the size, what's the scope, what's the cost of your content, and so on. Then you need to decide whether to watermark or to go the DRM route. But you got to do something to safeguard your content. I think the most, yeah.
Mr. Aliraza, we are getting ahead of time.
Ouch.
So we still have some aspect to it, especially the project schedule and project management. But
Yeah.
I think that before you go on that side, maybe
Yeah.
we can introduce some case studies and lesson learned by Mr. Adrian Wood and Mr.
Yes. Sure.
Moran.
Sure.
And then you can
Absolutely.
come back again to control the stage, right?
Sure.
So just a moment. Mr. Adrian Wood, are you online? Yeah, perfect. All right.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
so now we are having another very exciting session by Mr. Adrian Wood. He is the coordinator of Restoration Asia, and he began working in Asia in 1990s and became a council member of SEAPAVAA. The archive-based documentary he has worked on have garnered numerous awards from Oscar to Peabody and Gerson Awards. He himself received BAFTA's Special Craft Award for his contribution to British television. So we are honored to have him today. And Mr. Adrian Wood, over to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And Aliraza, thank you for that interesting presentation. Could you put the PowerPoint up? Please?
Yeah, sure. Just a moment.
Just try and catch some time up so that we're not overrunning.
All right. So we'll go direct to the...
So what I'd like to do is just give a quick oversight. The first time that somebody saw the value in audiovisual content for preservation of history was in 1898. And that was a Russian emigre in Paris called Boleslav Metadata. Next slide, please. Can we move on? It was, no, can we go back one? Okay, so in Asia, Vicente Salimbides proposed the same thing in 1952 in the Philippines. Nothing really came of it, but there was that concept laid out, and it was many years later before people started discussing archiving in the Philippines and its value. Next one, please. On the specifics of magnetic media, there have been 60 analog and digital formats, more than 60 analog and digital formats, and 20 of those or more have been used by broadcasters. The next one, please. I don't know if you can see the, can we go back? I don't know if you can see the number, but behind the screen there is, I think, 200 million hours of material existing in broadcasters' archives, and that was a number that was created 20 years ago. The next one. In 1977, the same year that AIBD was founded, Fiat IFTA was established in Europe, and it would create a community for audiovisual archives, where they could share their problems, share their issues, and discuss the issues of preservation and cataloging, etc. Next one. In 1980, UNESCO produced a white paper on the preservation of moving images and stressed its importance and laid out certain principles. Within that was the origins of an organization that is the CCAAA, that most audiovisual archiving associations or organizations affiliated to it belong to. And the next one. It was in 1996 that CIPAVA was established, that created a specific forum in Southeast Asia and the Pacific for AV archives and archivists. It also allows people from other regions, and there are many people who participate in CIPAVA that come from Europe, from North America, and also from Africa. Next one, please. The situation today is quite an interesting one. That last month, EASA, an organization that focuses on sound archivists, published its findings of the Magnetic Tape Alert project. This was written in collaboration with UNESCO's Information for All program. The survey received a total of 411 submissions from 355 unique respondents. The collections identified reside in 76 different countries. Next one, please. It reports that there are 8.5 million items accounted for in this survey, 4.4 million audio items and 4.1 million of video items. Next one. What's surprising, given those numbers, and given the numbers of broadcasters there are, that out of the 355, only 23 were broadcasters. And only 30 of those, less than 10%, were from 17 countries in Asia, when indeed there are far more countries in Asia. Can we go on? The issues we face is where you have large volumes of archives, how do you fund their migration? As Aliraza was saying, equipment and expertise to operate and maintain it is very hard to find. There is a continuing growth in content, and there's a legacy of content that means that content is daily being lost. If everyone in the world and in AIBD's area or CIPAVA's area were trying to find equipment, and quite often people contact me saying, where can I find a U-matic deck? Where can I find an M2 deck? you'll have a situation where the price on the second-hand market goes exponentially through the roof, and it's a concern. Next one, please. The question about what we save, I think we've skipped a couple. I mean, there are different categories of material. No, okay. All right, there are different categories of material, whether you're preserving news and current affairs materials, whether you're preserving material that's of social or cultural significance in history, or you're just looking for content that can generate income. They're all different criteria and have different needs, but the fundamentals, as Ali Raza was explaining, was to have solid systems to rely on, that you can therefore build secure collections, secure storage, and have value, not necessarily commercial financial value, but have cultural value in terms of your country, if you're a public service broadcaster, whether it's a corporate collection in terms of your corporate entity. For everybody and everything, there is value in history, and it's important to keep it. The issue that I was speaking a moment ago about was about the need for storage, sorry, the need for equipment and how to resource it. It seems to my mind that what we should be looking for are the creations of various regional centers of excellence, whereby it's not everybody chasing the last surviving 2-inch quad machine or the last surviving 1-inch B machine. It's a need to put those in a place where the content can be delivered to the center, and that way that the resources that are limited and the world still has can be used to the best possible use. You know, one key thing is that whether you're working from a videotape or a piece of film, is you use the best possible source element. And there were stories that came out of the UK, and if you go to the BBC's website, you'll find lots of white papers published by various BBC departments. And the classic mistake they made was migrating an awful lot of videotape 20 or 30 years ago. Can we go back, please? 20 or 30 years ago, they migrated everything to D3. It was only when certain events were needed to be extracted from those D3 tapes, it was found that the content could only be played back on the machine that had recorded the D3. And the BBC had trashed an awful lot of those master elements, which meant their content was lost. As Ali Raza was advocating, what we need to do is make sure that non-proprietary formats and open source codecs are used, so that you are not a hostage to a commercial owner. The originals, to my mind, should always be kept so that errors can be rectified. Ali Raza talked about his client having a desire to make 2 LTOs for security stored in different locations, and 2 data servers stored in located separately for insurance purposes or security purposes. I would also go a step further. If you are moving from a tape format to a file format and then carrying out restoration on that file, I would keep an LTO of the unrestored content and then 2 LTOs of the restored content. But that is, to use an old saying, using belts and braces and also bootstraps as well. And finally, I think always there's a need, whatever decision you take, you get expert validation of the proposed strategies that you are going to go down. Not saying that I am an expert in this, because digital migration of film is one thing I know about. digital migration of magnetic media is not my speciality, and I'd rather put up my hand and say, I don't know about that, and this is a person who does. Now we can go on to the next slide, which just to share with you, this is a situation that was discovered in a country in Southeast Asia, and keep going through them, please. And you can see how magnetic media, and these were taken 15 years or so ago, how magnetic media has been neglected in certain countries. Now, I know full well that the situation in this country, and as you can see from the slides, you'll see this is Thailand. I know that 15 years, 20 years on from this, the situation doesn't exist. Please keep going. Everything has been cleaned, stored, migrated. However, this is a situation I'm sure in some countries today you could still find. The world is not a perfect place. Please keep going. And on to the next one, please. Okay, you see in the background there are those two strange looking grey boxes. I believe, if my memory is correct, that those contain the heads for 2-inch quad machines. So if in a storeroom somewhere in your company or your station or network, you have anything looking like that, they could be gold dust. Move on, please. And there's something that our next speaker may recognize with the kangaroos on it. Keep on going. Keep on going. All sorts of media, not just magnetic, is at risk. And I think really we have a responsibility to the future generations to do what we can to preserve it. Please keep going. Please keep going. And on and on and on. Keep going. If these do not bring a tear to your eye, I'm not sure what would. But it's important for all of us that we do what we can to preserve it. Thank you. I think I may have got us back near time. I hope so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adrian Wood. And definitely our participants have so many questions from you. But before that, I would like to invite Mr. Jan Muller. Mr. Muller, if you can turn on your video. Mr. Jan Muller is Chief Executive Officer of National Film and Sound Archive of Australia. Mr. Muller is also a member of the advisory board of the Center for Media History, HD. Mr. Muller is a highly experienced CEO and leader in the digital heritage and culture sector internationally. Mr. Muller? Perfect. Your mic is on mute? Yeah, perfect.
So, you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Mr. Muller?
Put up the slides, please.
Yes. Your title of your presentation is Deadline 2025. He will be talking about his project. Just let me.
That's right.
Start his presentation. And Mr. Muller, over to you.
Thank you very much. Deadline 2025 is actually the name of the program that we started about 5-6 years ago. We deliberately called it that way because we knew that everything that matters in terms of magnetic tape will be lost forever if we don't start digitize it. I'm talking here about magnetic tape. And it is what Adrian just said. It's much more than that. We talk about safeguarding our national collections, audiovisual collections. Obviously, it's also about film, of course. But given the fact that film is more stable than magnetic tape, the urgency for us in Australia is that we focus and decided to focus on magnetic tape mainly in first instance. Also given the fact that our film digitization activities are pretty straightforward already, and we are making the numbers, so to say, from a film perspective already. Next slide, please. The deadline 2025. So collections at risk, as we call it, because governments, past and present in Australia, have invested in audiovisual culture and industries, obviously. The NFSA in Australia holds a lot of broadcast material, magnetic tape, that is. And what we say here, and it's actually supported by UNESCO, is that all tape-based formats created in the 20th century are now obsolete. Tape that is not digitized by 2025, we risk losing forever, which creates literally a deadline and a dilemma as well. And a dilemma for those involved in, the creation, preservation, safeguarding of this magnetic tape, and actually of memories. And that's what we do as an archive. I always say we keep memories alive. That's our main target. Next slide, please. More than any other medium, moving image and sound recordings, as I said, can bring the memory of a nation to life. Time, place, actions are invoked more vividly than through any text-based documentation. So it's not a miracle that broadcasters use and reuse their collections a lot. It's about keeping memories alive, meaning that in documentaries, in news items, broadcast material is used a lot, reused a lot, which means that, again, if they want to use that in a proper way, in a digital way, we need to digitize these collections if it's only for the reuse purposes, let alone the safeguarding principles behind it. The FSA's national collection records every aspect of Australian life. The greatest concentration of audiovisual materials is looked after by the National Film and Sound Archive. Other institutions in the country are also responsible for preserving and providing access to a vast range of formats, which means there's a lot of audiovisual material in the country, apart from what the NFSA holds as the National Audiovisual Archive in the country. The National Archives, the National Library of Australia, other Commonwealth organisations, such as AIBD, which is the Aboriginal Research Centre in Australia, but also the Australian War Memorial. National broadcasters have their own collections and their own archives, ABC and SBS, for example. State libraries, it's not just federal material, it's also state libraries involved. Which means that our national estate is subdivided in many locations, and until now there has not been a joint management plan in place to unlock this for the public. So apart from the digitization issues, there are also issues in terms of who's responsible. Wouldn't it be better to just start with one place, one location where we take care of all the audiovisual archives in the country? Maybe not necessarily in terms of holding the items and holding the collections, but more in terms of safeguarding it. You will see later in my presentation, in the case that I present about the NFSA, that one of our strategic priorities is to become a center, and Adrian mentioned that already, to become a center of excellence for audiovisual heritage in the country, simply because of the fact that it's so fragmented everywhere that this needs a joint management plan. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So magnetic tape we're talking about. At this stage, we're all still living more or less in an analog archival reality. There are just only a few archives in the world who are completely digital, but most of us are in that digital transformation. most of them within that journey from analog to digital have only started recently. So we're all facing a lot of analog reality issues. While original film and record formats will remain largely stable, as I said, for the foreseeable future, all tape-based formats created in the 20th century are now obsolete. And the ability to successfully replay magnetic tape depends on the interplay of equipment, skills, and technologies. And this wants a healthy ecosystem. And again, we're talking about a lot of broadcasters and broadcast archives. Is collapsing due to the removal of tape from the marketplace, as broadcasters have shifted to file-based workflows now. But it's also about skills that we will lose. The last generation of fully experienced analog to digital transfer broadcast engineers will be retired or are retiring already. So their practical skills will either have been strategically shared with the newer generation of digital engineers, or indeed lost forever. So what is magnetic tape in our definition? Magnetic tape, and you see a lot of these formats here on this slide, audio and video. Magnetic tape technology has been used for audio from, let's say, the mid-1940s, and videos more or less from the mid-1950s. Think about, and the same in every country, many Australians in this case, but certainly everywhere, have owned music cassette tapes and VHS videotapes. Perhaps they recorded home movies on a camcorder, or had an 8-track machine, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Magnetic tape was used professionally as well as in the homes, and the NFSA holds over 40 different magnetic formats across video and audio. 40, meaning 40 different workflows, including machines, including skills, in order to even start the digitization of these formats. And Adrian mentioned it briefly already, and then there's another topic, and that is the heads of these machines. The magnetic heads of these machines are becoming rare, and there are hardly factories that still make them. So if something happens with the heads of these older equipment, again, it's an extra complicating factor. We need the knowledge and the technology to even maintain these heads, because they are the most rare and vulnerable items in this machine. So there are a lot of issues that together define the fact that we're talking about deadline 2025. Next slide, please. So in order to give you a little bit more of an overview of what we're doing at the NFSA, I gave a number of presentations last year about digital transformation in audiovisual archives. And one of these presentations, and I published an article about it as well, is called 10 Steps to Become Digital by Design. How will an archive be digital in the future and successfully complete that journey from analog to digital? And this is not a presentation about these 10 steps to become digital by design, but at least I use a few of these items in order to indicate what's important in our opinion at the NFSA when we talk about this digitization of magnetic tape, and actually in a way that we call it large-scale digitization. So one of the things that we did a couple of years ago is to redefine our vision, mission, and strategy. And that's important because if you're able to define your vision, mission, and strategy in a proper way, it also leads to an understanding of how you behave when it comes to digitization, for example. So we said, when we redefined our vision and our mission, we said in terms of our vision, we believe that the future of audiovisual archives is digital, period. And we envision the NFSA to be at the forefront of a shift towards the digital, always-on archive. We believe that an archive will be digital, but it's also always on. It should be accessible 24/7. And why? Because we need to have, as an archive, we need to have a maximum impact and relevance in society. If we're not relevant as archives, we simply have no future. We need to be relevant, meaning people should be able to access, use, the material in our archives, the collections that we digitize. It's our mission to collect, preserve, and share. So sorry, can I have one slide back, please? Yeah, thank you. It's our mission to collect, preserve, and share our national audiovisual collection, past, present, and future. And that future part is important too, because it's not just about television, radio, and film material. Of course, audiovisual heritage will be defined by the use of what's happening now, digital media. Online media, web video, for example, attracts more viewers than most of the, let's say, traditional broadcasted materials. But also video games is something that we started to collect and preserve at the NFSA because it is an important audiovisual industry. It's part of the creative industry of the country, and it makes sense in terms of defining the media history of a country, which is again a role of an archive like ours. And we say that users should be able to actively engage with it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we defined 5 strategic priorities, and we'll keep this short. Number 1 is digitize the national audiovisual collection. Obviously, we need to digitize first. That's crucial. So that's our main objective for the coming years. And deadline 2025 and our film digitization is actually an answer to that. So I'll get back to that later. Number 2 is establish the National Center for Excellence in Audiovisual Heritage. Again, bring together the knowledge, but also the resources and the funding that all these separate collection holders in the country can bring together in order to digitize the whole collection, the whole national collection, and not just the collection that the NFSA holds, or for example ABC, the broadcaster, or for example the National Archives in the country, but bring this together. The NFSA is actually the link with that National Center for Excellence to all the other collection holders in the country. And again, given the fact that we now got the funding, and I'll get back to that later as well, now get the funding to digitize some material, the fact that we can start this means that we can literally start to become that National Center for Excellence in audiovisual heritage. We can help others digitize their collections as well. And the biggest ambition for the NFSA is to be able to do that regionally as well, not just in the country, but also helping other countries digitizing their content and make sure that it's safeguarded for future generations. Number 3 is build our national profile, which means we need to be visible and relevant as an archive. That's why we started to do exhibitions, for example, with our collections, not just on site for people to visit, but also online, with a lot of online material that helped us to create online exhibitions, for example. Number 4 is collect, preserve, and share multimedia and new media. That's the future of audiovisual archiving. Make sure that we don't just take care of broadcast material and film material, but also web video, video games, interactive documentaries, you name it. And the last one is redefine our physical presence, which means that we are preparing for a move and for a new building, which will happen in 5 years' time from now. We just recently finished our business case and got an approval from the government to move ahead with that. That's the long-term approach. Next slide, please. So we focused on digital transformation. As I said before, we believe in the fact that our future is digital, but it means that we need to digitally transform the organization and actually the culture of the organization. It's not just about technology, but it's also what's happening in the minds of our people. To become digital by design means that we need to change the culture. Next slide, please. And changing a culture will certainly be helped with large-scale digitization, simply because of the fact that we will start to digitize our magnetic tape collections, which consists of hundreds of thousands of items. The simple fact that we start that large-scale digitization process means that we actually transform our organization already. This is so big. This is involving so many people, internally and externally, that digital transformation almost automatically help. Yeah, next slide, please. Another important topic when it comes to become digital by design and digital transformation, as I said, is be visible and be relevant. And I will show you in the next slide, I will show you what it means. This is an example from where I worked before, the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision, and we digitized the whole national collection between 2007 and 2014, in 7 years' time. So this program was called Images for the Future, and it involved 100,000 hours of film, 100,000 hours of video, a couple of 100,000 hours of audio material. But more importantly, we found out, and you see this in the graphic, we found out that when we started in 2007, which is where you see the first red dots, red parts in this diagram, we already saw that the use of the material increased enormously. So the length of the parts in the graphics indicate the use of the material. And the blue ones, the analog ones, in terms of reusing parts of our collection, is decreasing, whereas the red ones, the digitized parts of the collection, are increasing enormously. Actually, this shows that it makes sense to digitize, and it makes sense to make it available for use. And it also creates, and I think at the end of the day, that's when it comes to the pitch around how to get money for digitization, make sure that your government understands that creating access means that material is used, as you can see in this graph, and it's not different in the NFSA's situation, and which creates value for the public, for the education sector, for researchers, for television and filmmakers, you name it. The fact that material can be used creates value, and that's a crucial one when it comes to digitization, and again for the pitch for money for digitization. Next slide, please. So what I always say, it's not just about preservation and or digitization anymore. It's about what you do with your collections. Make sure that it's accessible, that people can use it and reuse the material. And of course, there comes with a lot of topics, and I will talk about that briefly in the next slides. We're always on, meaning you will always be available, and always in beta, meaning you will always be transforming. And that's another given. The fact that you're transforming means that you will always be building, which is part of digital transformation, to create an organization that is agile and flexible enough to answer all the needs from the users, which is important too. Know your users, create an engagement with them, and put the customer first. And the customer can be a visitor of your exhibitions. It can be a staff member. It can be a user of the archives. It can be a student who needs material. It can be a maker of a documentary or films, whatever. Be sure that you understand what they want, what they need from your archive. And that's just another way to become relevant and to make sure that people can use your material properly. Next slide, please. Another important thing, embrace the power of data analytics. We started, we just recently established a digital data team in order to help us understand what we got in our collections, but also it helps us to streamline the effectiveness and efficiency of our digitization workflows, knowing how much you've got from a particular part of your collection in terms of format, but also in terms of interesting material or not, or the topics around it and so on, helps us to create the most efficient workflows. And actually, data analytics helps us to tell informed stories about our collections to our stakeholders. Next slide, please. So what we say, we keep memories alive by telling stories with our archives. That's what we do. So that storytelling aspect of our archives in terms of making things accessible and reusable for others that want to tell stories with our archive material is crucial. This is an important statement for the NFSA. We keep memories alive by telling stories with our archive. Next slide, please. So having said this actually is a sort of summary of what I've said before. So as a recap, we redefined our vision and mission and strategy, and we said that we need to share and actively engage with our users. We know that digital transformation as an organization, as a culture, is still happening, but it's important that we move from analog to digital, because the future of audiovisual archives is digital. Large-scale digitization, in this case, our deadline 2025 program, is now really our core business. And actually, and again, I'll show that later, it happens given the fact that we are now able to digitize, given the fact that we got money from our government to do it. Another important statement: access is use is value. Being relevant is key, being visible is key. Put your customer first. Data analytics and storytelling are the things that actually define everything we do. And you see it linked here to words like access, to engagement with our users, to copyright issues. Yeah, next slide. To marketing communication issues. Make sure that you are able to sell your story. And to innovation. Innovation is a crucial one as well. You need to innovate. You need to be able to be flexible towards the future. So these words, actually, next slide, please. Now, these words, this summary helped us to create our project management plan when it comes to the digitization of all these magnetic tapes. Here you see our minister, Paul Fletcher, who kindly gave us $7 million to digitize our collection. This didn't happen overnight. This took 3 years of lobbying, constant lobbying, with his predecessors as well, in order to, again, make sure that they understood that the National Film and Sound Archive is relevant, that it makes sense to have a national collection that is accessible and usable to be relevant. And I can't say it enough, it's crucial. These were the words that he mentioned in front of our building during a press conference announcing the money that we got. And he said, converting the material into a digital form so that it will be available for scholars, available for documentaries, available for all kinds of users. Next slide, please. And that means that no, the other way around, sorry. Yeah, this one, thank you. And that means that he also understands that the value of a digital collection is in the use and the access, because he says it himself. This is about the sharing part of our mission: collect, preserve, and share. It's about access and use. And this is crucial in every pitch to every government or every funding proposition. It's about access and use. Otherwise, no one will put money behind it. We don't digitize for the sake of digitization. It's about, as I said before, what you do with your collections. Next slide, please. So again, an overview of the words that define our workflow and project plan for digitization: access, engagement, copyright, marketing, communication, and innovation. Next slide, please. And here you see how we define that. So digitization and innovation in the middle. This is where the digitization project happens. This is where large-scale digitization starts. There are 3 big working programs around it. Copyright, crucial. We said we don't digitize before we understand the copyright situation of the specific collections that we want to digitize. If we don't know if we are even able to show it on our website, or if we don't know if we're able to even share it with the public, we're not talking about owning the material, but the simple accessibility of our content, then we simply don't digitize it. If we don't know what the situation is in terms of the reuse, then we don't digitize it. So copyright is a big issue, and before we start our processes, we need to understand the situation. So there's a lot of handwork, more or less. The other one is access and engagement. Make sure that you create ways to access and engage with users. And as I said before, marketing and communication. This is a simple lesson from 7 years of large-scale digitization in the Netherlands. Tell the public what you're doing. Show them what you're digitizing. So in the NFSA, we started an online web item where people literally can see real time what we digitize, simply to make them understand what it means to digitize their collective memories. So there's a lot of marketing and communication involved. We train our people in project-based working, but it's another more hygiene factor in terms of what do you need as an organization. Next slide, please. We're almost there. This is the slide. I will talk about this very briefly. This is a copyright solution in the Netherlands. This is written in Dutch, so it's a bit hard to understand. But actually, this says the red ones are the archive responsibilities. The blue ones are the broadcasters' responsibilities. The left side, you see the genres: films, satire, cabaret, music, teenage kids programs, documentaries. You can probably more or less read what it says. News, actualities, sports, and so on. And you see at the horizontal axis the numbers of years that it needs to be in use with the right owners, in this case the blue ones, before it can be used by the archive. But at least it helped us to define that everything, for example, older than 25 years is dedicatedly usable to the archives. And for example, news or sports material, it depends on the project and the processes, but that between 5 and 25 years, it's able to be reused by the archive, and so on. This helps us to define the situation, and makes at least clear who is dealing with what. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is my last slide. So the future FSA, if we talk about the future of broadcast archives, or in this case, part of the archive is broadcast material, the magnetic tape mainly. We collect, preserve, and share, and we want and need to base our positioning on digital, on access, and on trust. We are the trustworthy Center for Excellence of Audiovisual Heritage. We help digitize, we also help to keep it safe for future generations. And any Amazon, Google, or whatever big company will never be able to be a trustworthy archive for your collections simply because it's a commercial operation. National Archive delivers trust and is a trustworthy, safe place for your collections, and that makes us distinct and other different from other organizations. We also said from arts and culture, the basis of our funding, we actually enter a situation where we position ourselves as part of infrastructure simply because we do everything digital and we digitize collections, and we make sure that through connectivity we can share the material on platforms with the public, with education sector, with researchers, and so on. So actually we're moving from an archive to a media culture institute with probably a broader role and different kind of value. Value that's been defined by digital economy, by education, by media literacy, which is an important topic for the NFSA and for probably more archives in the world. We will help to, for example, create context around news items. You know, in this era where it's all about fake news, one of the last trustworthy remainders is an audiovisual archive in this case. So media literacy is crucial, but also the whole media and creative industry focus. And maybe even that leads to a new name for the NFSA. But this defines our future thinking based on infrastructure, connectivity, sharing of the material, building platforms for accessibility, and so on. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much, Mr. Mullar. It was indeed a very information-packed presentation. So thank you again. Now I was looking at the questions from the participants. We have plenty of questions and we have some announcements as well regarding this specific subject of visual archiving, but that I will be revealing at the end of this show. But now I would like to invite Mr. Ali Raza again. He will be talking about the video restoration and how we can enhance the whole experience and the quality of the visual archives. Mr. Ali Raza, back to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I mean, I would also like to thank Mr. Jan Muller and Adrian Wood for very informative presentations. I really enjoyed it. We should share some information later on after this show is over. So the next topic that I'm going to cover is restoration. What usually happens is that once the archive has been done, once the video has been taken away from the tape into digital medium, then we find that, oh, the video is not really very nice. So can we start the presentation, Mr. Nabil?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just a moment.
Thank you. Yeah. So, and I mean, better than saying content is king, I think the previous presenters have come up with this very well. They're of great historical importance and deserve long-term preservation, especially 2025. That was a very informative session. So we need to, I mean, there's no question about the fact that we need to preserve it, and we also need to enhance it so that it is capable of broadcast quality video. Otherwise, if the quality is bad and if you can't really hear the audio properly, or if you can't see the color properly, then it's of really, I mean, the value of the video really goes down. So once you do the restoration, then the value of the video is enhanced by multiple times, and it's very important that we do that. So the question is, how do we do that? We did some research on our own and we found these answers. Yes, sir. The next one. So the main reason for the degradation of the video is the color degradation. It has stains, it has film grain, noise, it has misaligned channels, it has vertical line scratches. I mean, these are some of the common problems that we found when we took the video from old tapes, especially the reels, the 2-inch reels and the 1-inch reels and all that. So all these were common problems, and you cannot, some of the video is in such a bad shape that it just simply can't be shown on TV. So to make it come up to the quality, we found some ways of doing it. Yes, sir. Next one. So this is how you read. This is how the picture that is that you get when you read it from the tape. And as you can see, it's not possible to put up a picture like this on your television or on your computer screen. What we need is this. Yes, sir. This, right? Much better. You can see such a huge difference between the previous one and this one. So if I give you a previous picture and tell you to make it into this one, how do you do it? So that's the whole point of this presentation. Let me quickly move on to the next one. So there is a software from a country called Austria, which does the cleaning of restoration of old and defective videos. So defects like scratch concealment, camera or gate hairs, destroyed images or parts of the images. And the destruction happened because of splices, tears, warped images, dead pixels, fixed hair, etc. Sometimes the defects happen because of format conversions. Sometimes there were single frame defects. Like in a single frame, there was a lot of dust, dirt, blotches, scratches, dropout, damages, and so on and so forth. So how do we do it? Yes, sir. Okay, play the video. So this is a video. There's no audio in it. There's only a video. So I'll try to explain the video as we go along. So these are the two films side by side. One that was the original film before the restoration, and the other, on the other side, we have a film which was restored. And as you can see, there's a huge big difference. So dust. Yeah, you can see the whole lot of dust in the previous picture, and then you passed it through the restoration and the dust was removed and the picture became a lot better. Yeah, noise removal. A lot of noise in the previous picture. Then it was cleaned up and it became much better. Liquor. scratches. And most important, stabilizing the image. So you can see so much difference between the previous picture and the restored picture. And now you see the film, same film after it is restored. So they rewind and then play it again. So now this is another video which is in a really bad shape, and how it has been restored into this. I mean, as you can see, there's such a vast difference between two videos. And let me add that all this restoration was done when you're automatically passing the video through the restoration system. So it does it, all of this is done mainly automated. So much difference. We rewind the picture and then show you the new picture after restoration. Picture has been stabilized and restored. Lovely, beautiful. Now there's a color. So previously what we had seen is black and white. Now we'll see a color picture and how restoration is done on the color picture. Noise reduction. You can see clearly the difference. Next one, sir. Yeah, so what we are seeing is that it makes a huge difference to the videos once you have done the cleaning up and restoration. And it becomes from, I mean, a useless video can become a broadcast grade video after it is being done. And this is what we've shown you was done with the automatic passing the videos through the restoration system. But if you really go into frame by frame, and if it's a really very important clip, and if you want to go frame by frame, then a much better job can be done. I mean, going frame by frame and cleaning up a particular piece in the picture is very difficult and very time consuming and repetitive task. But if it's done properly, then it can really do wonders for your video. Yes, sir. So all these can be done: dust, deflicker, interpolate, grain noise reduction, dewarp, stabilize the image, scratch, remove the scratch, paint, dead pixel, remove the dead pixel, primary color correction, etc. can be done by this system. Once you pass the video through the system, then all these anomalies can be restored to the best possible way. Yes, sir. So that's it about the restoration part. I mean, it's a very large topic, and there's a whole pile of things that we can go into in great detail. How to set up the workflow, how to make sure it is done properly, and what are the parameters that should be set to make sure that the video conforms to a particular set of parameters, and so on and so forth. But I believe that what we want to show in this particular presentation was to just give you an idea of what restoration can do for your old videos and how you can save you from the disappointment of seeing that, oh my God, after spending such a lot of time and effort, money, we managed to restore the videos from the tape, but the quality was so bad that it's not suitable for me. So why did I go into all this? Why did I go and do all this? So what we wanted to show is that it is still worth it, because a whole lot of technologies are available to make the quality of the video come up to broadcast standards. So that was the point of showing this to you. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Nabil.
Sir, thank you very much, Mr. Aliraza. And we have plenty of questions, but before we go to the questions, we want to have one case study from India. And I believe that if Mr. Chaturvedi can raise his hand, and we can have him on camera so he can discuss his case study regarding Mahabharata. Mr. Chaturvedi? All right, before he comes, maybe we can answer some of the questions. Okay, Devesh Kumar. Mr. Devesh Kumar, I'm promoting you as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera and open your mic. Mr. Devesh Kumar. All right, before we go, I think we can just answer some of the questions. There is a question, Mr. Aliraza, there is a question for you by Mr. Shwan, that how often you should back up? Mr. Aliraza?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, how often should we back up our things?
Yeah, so I wish I had the answer. Unfortunately, I really don't have the answer.
All right.
The thing is that, I mean, it's a very good question. So let me on my video. Yeah, it's a good question. I really don't have the answer. It depends on the genre. It depends on there's a cost attached to it, and it depends on the workflow and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Some of the participants have also asked about the costing and the pricing of this whole process. Is it possible to give in this as a generic thing?
No, it's not, because this is not something you buy off the shelf. It depends on the scope, on the scale, on the features, and so on and so forth. So each organization, I believe, has to set up a system which is useful for them, um, and it's not possible to give an off the shelf cost for anybody. We have to really sit down, have a deep discussion with them, understand what the requirements are, understand what the objectives are, and the scope the thing, size the thing, and so on and so forth, and then
Right.
come up with a specific proposal which is tailored to your particular.
Perfect. Perfect. Before I go to Mr. Devesh Kumar, there is another question I want to bring to Mr. Adrian Wood. Mr. Kasim, I believe he's from Bangladesh. Mr. Adrian, you're online, right? So
Yeah,
the
I'm here.
question is that by Mr. Kasim is that nowadays cloud storage or central storages are becoming popular. Do you think that in near future, an idea of data bank for audiovisual archiving managed by some national or trusted central agency can evolve? This will help avoiding creation of multiple archives, islands, or silos, which in principle do not appear much different from the earlier analog era. What do you have to say?
Um, I I think in an ideal world, it would be perfect to have a scenario whereby you could have centralized storage, whether it be in a cloud, but a cloud is effectively centralized storage. However, what you are reliant upon is political stability where that storage is located. So you need at least, I think, forgetting political issues, but more the issues of even climate and natural disaster. You need at least dual storage locations. But it's certainly something that we could negotiate it, and where you have land that is stable, it's certainly a place to consider locating large storage facilities. I mean, just briefly to go back on the point of backup, I think you should rely on a system whereby there's perpetual backup. So whenever a file is created, it's duplicated and backed up at that point. So it's not saying let's go home on Thursday or Monday and we'll press the backup switch on our system. It's perpetually being backed up. Whether Aliraza would agree with me on that, or Jan, perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah, if I can add, thank you, Adrian. I agree with Adrian. I mean, one of our customers did, did go onto a cloud and started to upload everything onto the cloud. And initially, they were told that the cost is only so much, per MB is so much, and they were very happy with it. But very soon, the bills started piling up, and they very quickly realized that if we have our own system, then it'll be a lot cheaper to store it in our own device. So from a cost-effective point of view, I don't think cloud is a very good option. Second thing is that, as Adrian pointed out, it should be something that is in your control, that is in your hands, that you can access whenever you want, wherever you want. It should not be in some other place where you may not have access due to political reasons, which Adrian pointed out very, very, very acutely. Third thing is that, you should store it in your premise and you should make several backups. When you store it in cloud, you don't know how many people are accessing it. You don't know how many backups they are making, where they are making those backups, and who's accessing it, and so on. So I agree with Adrian completely.
By the way, it reminds me of a movie, 1981, novel as well, George Orwell, where everything was archived and controlled by the
1984.
yeah, 1984. Yeah, sorry about that. So it was kind of a thing. All right, so we still have some questions, but before that, I would like to invite Mr. Devesh Kumar, who will be giving us a case study from India regarding Mahabharata. Mr. Devesh Kumar, if you can turn on your cam and unmute your microphone.
Hello,
Yeah.
am I audible?
Yes, perfectly well, sir.
Uh, First of all, yeah. My greetings to all the participants and panelists, and thanks to you. Uh, I'm Devesh Kumar. I am Director of Engineering in Central Archives, Prasar Bharati. And actually, here archives are distributed. There is a central archives as well as some regional archives in different parts of the country, like Kolkata, Chennai, Guwahati, and Mumbai. Okay. So, first of all, I thank to panelists for sharing, especially Mr. Raja, Mr. Andren, John Muller, for sharing the case study and all the details. Because in Prasar Bharati archives, we are in a process of modernizing our old library and MAM systems. Currently, we are having some 15 to 20 years old uh, system. Those systems are on based on LTO4 only, and now in near future we are going to just planning to migrate to the latest technologies. So thanks to the panelists, I think I am very much uh, I will be very benefited with the inputs taken from the webinar. And now coming on the part, the story of some say old serials like Mahabharata and Ramayana. So I'd say that Prasar Bharati utilized this lockdown period for showing this religious and moral boosting content to the public, to the masses in the through the national channel, and this was really a big success uh, because and definitely some of these programs were arranged to our archives, and these epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, those were telecasted in 80s and 90s through Doordarshan. And you won't believe, means media reports are there. Doordarshan had become most watched television channel in the country during the month of April and May after decades. And these old programs kept locked down people entertained, motivated, and their morale got boosted. So such this the national channels of Doordarshan, that is from Prasar Bharati, reached more great heights, and there was a huge jump in the viewership of the channel. It was 40,000, that is 40K%. So 40K% was the jump in the viewers. So it was the story, and that's it from my side. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Devesh Kumar. Mr. Muller, are you there? So we have
Yes, I
one,
am.
yes, sir. All right, we have one question from Miss Nandini Bhattacharya. She wants to discuss about the metadata, and if you can just throw a light upon that, for the different categories of programs, should the metadata be different? If so, how? So. And then we have another question related to metadata by Mr. Qasim again. Once we create metadata for the archived content and decide to use a MAM system, and if we want to change to another MEM system in future, do we need to redo the metadata, or is it a standardized across MAM platforms?
Maybe I should answer that question.
Okay, sure. Mr. Alarazan?
Yeah, so we had this problem with some of our clients. They were using a database and they had put in a huge amount of data into this particular database. Unfortunately, this company got acquired by Oracle, and Oracle killed this particular database.
Okay.
So that database was no longer available. So now they had a lot of metadata in a database which was dying. So they came to us with a similar question that can we take data from this database and put it in another, in Oracle database basically. And I'm telling you, it was a nightmare because the structure of the database in the previous one was different. And we had to take, they wanted to take all the database out and put it in a new database, which had a totally different structure. I mean, very, very difficult. Secondly, as far as MAMs are concerned, each MAM is different. Each media asset management is different. They are structured differently. They work differently. They have underlying firmware, hardware, programming issues. So the answer is no. You can't take. If there are two separate media asset managements that are which are using the same database. Let's say two separate MAMs, and they are both using Oracle database. Then maybe it will be possible to take the data from one Oracle database into the second Oracle database. That could be possible. We could do some programming and get it done. But if one media asset manager is using Oracle and somebody else is using Microsoft SQL or something like that, taking data from Oracle into Microsoft SQL is
Right.
very difficult.
All right. I'm actually promoting all the attendees as a panelist, so they can raise their hand and ask the question and come on the cam as well to ask our speakers some questions. I would also like to ask Miss Nandini Bhattacharya. She mentioned in her chat that she cleaned more than 5,000 hours of videos. So we want to definitely hear from her if she's
First,
in the.
we should clap for her.
Yes, exactly. 9,000 is.
Yeah.
Ms. Nandini, I'm promoting you as a panelist. So, and then I think Dr. Shahidul Alam from Bangladesh, he's also with us. He has also one question from the speakers. I would like him to turn on his cam and maybe he can question himself. Ms. Nandini, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
perfectly well.
I'm
Perfectly.
afraid my camera is not working, but
Not a problem.
if you can hear me, then fine.
Sure, sure.
Hello and welcome to all attendees and panelists. In fact, yes, I am Assistant Director from the Eastern Zonal Archives, which is functioning under the administration of Central Archives. So Central Archives had sent us about 10,000 odd tapes for digitization along with metadata locators. And I was in charge of the RTI cleaning and the metadata function. So yes, indeed, as our panelists have pointed out, that many tapes had to be rejected because the climate in India is very soggy. And we could eventually roughly digitize from the Central Archives around 5,000 hours of tapes in various formats. So what else can I...
Okay. Thank you.
And also the
Huge
metadata
effort, I must say.
function, hence
Huge
my
effort.
question regarding metadata.
All right. Okay. There is one question which is kind of a very common question from this part of the world, South Asia, that they have pneumatic tapes and Betacam tapes, but are there any beta machines available or pneumatic to be hired by some agency or something like? Can we answer that question, speakers?
Yeah, it's possible. For how long, I don't know for how long it's possible, but there are some organizations that are like they are in the business of restoring, putting together old VTRs and trying to make them work. Yeah, so they may be available.
All right. There is another question by Mr. Tung Huang that if you can recommend some of the LTO storage systems that you have worked with.
Yeah, so there are a few companies that are working with the LTO storage systems. So there are some companies that do small LTO systems, and then there are some that do the big ones. So I mean, a few names are SpectraLogic and Zendata and a few others. About 5, 6, I think altogether 5, 6 companies are there. So, I mean, depending on the price and the performance that you want, you can choose which one. I can send you the names of the brands later on.
Perfect. Dr. Shahidul Alam, if you can turn on your camera and say your few words.
My camera isn't coming on, so you have to
okay.
just put up with me. Yeah.
All right. All right. So,
well, firstly, congratulations. I mean, it's been an excellent webinar, very, very informative. So thank you very much, and I hope you continue these webinars. They've been very useful. I have 2 questions basically. I'm more in the stills sector than the video sector, and I recognize that much of this has been directed towards video. I'm wondering whether the same principles apply to stills, particularly, I mean, in stills, obviously, the actual volumes are much smaller, the file sizes are much smaller, but apart from that, I don't know if there are other differences. But in my experience, when I've tried using restorative software on stills, it's also involved a loss of sharpness and some other degradation as well. Do you have a similar thing with video?
Yeah, I mean, once you take the original video and you make a, do something to it, obviously those videos will not remain the same. There will be some changes to it. In my experience, the changes that we see are positive changes because yes, some sharpness is degraded, but at the same time, they solve a lot of other problems as well. So if you see, I mean, all together, then I think they are more useful rather than destructive. Right?
You had a supplementary question to that. You had actually mentioned that if you do it frame by frame, then you can actually improve upon it. Is that because you then do work only on the damaged sections and thereby you protect the rest?
Yeah, so if you do it frame by frame, of course, it's much better, but then it's very time consuming and, with time, there is a cost, it's expensive. So yeah, if you do it frame by frame, yeah, it's much better than doing it on a wholesale basis where you just pass it through the software and.
Yeah. Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, Mr. Ardian,
on the frame by frame issue. Quite often in moving image, so I'll put my video back on.
Yeah.
With moving images, quite often the software is interpolating data from a preceding or existing frame into the damage frame, and so that's why it's effective, because it's moving data around across 2 or 3 images. But with stills, you don't have a preceding frame or following successive frame, so it won't work. But so I think there's a difference in the scenario. But one thing we've not talked about, I think, which is the importance of compression and whether when files are moved from a tape format to a data format, whether or not you employ lossless compression or lossy compression, because that can have a huge impact on the future quality of the image. And maybe Ali Raza would like to speak about that briefly.
Excellent point, Adrian. Thank you for bringing that up.
All right.
So, yeah, if I may just answer. So yeah, he's absolutely on the spot as usual. So there, Nabil, what I would suggest is that if there is a separate session on compression, file format, wrapper, codecs, because many of the people are not really clear about, they sort of mix up on all these different formats. So on all these different terms, and many organizations that I've been to, they use the word codec when they actually mean format. And vice versa. Yeah. So when you are going from tape format into a data format, then and deciding what's your house format, then all these things take on a huge amount of importance. And
Exactly.
many a times you've seen that, especially in audio, we've seen that the knowledge of what each format is all about and the details of each format and why we should avoid it or why we should go into it is not really there. So maybe at some point you need to have a session on that, and
Yeah,
we should invite Adrian to come onto that session.
yeah, that was the actual surprise which I wanted to reveal in the end, but that we will be talking about. Definitely,
Yeah.
we want to have some other parts and in-depth workshop on this thing, especially related to codecs, formats, and then the color correction itself. Because Davinci Resolve, I believe it's free, and I think it's available and accessible to everyone these days. So I think we can have a bit of theory about the color correction and all those kind of stuff, and how to enhance the visual thing. We also have some more questions. Just let me. Okay. But before that, I want to ask one question from Mr. Adrian. Mr. Adrian, as far as I remember, that in 80s there was a huge what you call promotion of one concept of rotoscoping, where the black and white pictures were colored. They had experimented a lot on that kind of thing, and even in 2000s, and in 2000s we had some softwares as well, but somehow we never got to see that. Just a moment. Can you all mute your microphone, all the attendees, please? All right. So is we never had any kind of promotion of that kind of rotoscoping method in nowadays, where the black and white movies were converted into color. Or
There's a
yeah. So
there's a lot of there's an awful lot of discussion about colorization, and there was a film that relates to World War One that was colorized by Peter Jackson 2 years ago, that opened up a huge debate yet again about it, where he worked with a film archive and took a black and white film, because that was the nature of the material, colorized it, and then released it in commemoration of the end of World War One. There's a huge ethical debate about colorization. I think if an archive retains the black and white image and then allows a production or filmmaker or program maker to manipulate the content, and as long as there's honesty in the presentation of that colorized, or to use the old expression, rotoscoping, if there's clarity about what's been done, I don't have a problem with it. I don't enjoy watching it because there's no guarantee, as we were talking about earlier. If somebody's got a blue shirt on or a green shirt on, then it changes frame to frame. We've got no idea what shirts people were wearing in 1914. I mean, we can guess what they may be by shades of gray, but I mean, it's a whole different ethical debate. And there's a question about even whether an archive or a library would allow to have their content manipulated. There are some institutions who don't allow their material that was captured in a 133 or 137 aspect ratio to be converted to 16:9. Right. And it's a question about when you migrate from a tape format, whether you move it from 4:3, which was the standard definition aspect ratio, to a 16:9 ratio, whether you crop it, whether you capture it in a file with black pillar boxing. I don't know if Aliraza's had any questions raised about how data should be captured and preserved, whether aspect ratios should be respected.
Yeah,
Yes,
this
yes,
is
yes.
another subject.
Yeah, this is another huge topic, exactly. And every time Adrian comes, he brings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can throw the elephants into the room for you quite happily.
All right. There is another question by Mr. Achalu. I think that he's from Voice of Nigeria. His question is that they have lots of audio materials on analog format. Most of them are covered up in dust and mold in some cases. Please, if you can throw more light on the physical restoration techniques of audio tapes on reels, cassettes, and vinyls. Anyone?
So as Adrian mentioned earlier in his presentation, we suggest that he takes the help of an expert. He don't try to do it yourself, because if you make a mistake, it's gone. And once it's gone, it's gone. You can never bring it back. Yeah. So, I mean, the expert that comes to my mind is Adrian. So you should maybe, buy him a plane ticket and get him.
You're far too generous and kind about me. I know a lot of, I've had the good fortune to spend a lot of time working in this area and meeting a lot of people who have specialist skills, whether they're recovering 1/4-inch mag tapes, whether they're recovering 78 discs, or whether they're recovering wax discs from the 19th century. There are specialists in every area.
Yeah.
Sadly, they grow older and they leave us.
Yeah.
But there are still people out there who've learnt those skills. There are institutions who've learnt those skills. And as Jan was saying, the key thing is to train younger people in those skills, so the skills aren't lost. So that, somebody knows how to replace the heads in a 2-inch quad machine, or change the sprocket drives on a 35mm projector. Those are the skills that our world is losing rapidly, in the way that when I was a kid, newspapers were printed with typeset, and there used to be typesetters. There used to be people who made wooden barrels by hand. Those people vanish every day of our lives. And we should treasure those people and respect them and keep them alive, and particularly their skills alive.
All right. We have two same question by two different individuals, but I would like to have the answer from Mr. Jan Muller, that how safe is to store the archived material in servers. And one question was that how much we can trust in cloud server backup. Mr. Muller?
I think, given the fact that we're all dealing with so much data, we're sort of a cloud in our own way already. You can't see me probably. Not sure. I'll switch off. I think web's not functioning well here. So we say, actually, we don't believe. We believe in the technical capacity and possibilities of cloud storage, and obviously this comes with most of the cases with a much more interesting financial solution, because it's cheaper. But what many archives forget is, and that's the reason for us not to work with cloud solutions so far, even when it's cheaper to store it in cloud solutions, retrieval of data, so the reuse aspect, is pretty expensive. This is the business model for most of the cloud solutions companies. It's not the basic storage that they charge, it's the use of the material. And if you're an archive that, like us, and like many broadcast archives actually, are based on reusing material from a basic principle, then it's going to be tricky and expensive. So that's, from a financial perspective, that's the reason for the NFSA not to work with cloud solutions. And at the same time, given the fact that we're dealing with petabytes of data already, and the archive grows with more or less 1 petabyte per year, actually you're already creating your own cloud in a way that it's about a lot of data. We decided that we rather take care of our own cloud and treat it as a sort of cloud solution with the right software, with the right MUM systems, and the right people surrounding it. And also to be able to be not depending on commercial propositions, which comes with trustworthiness issues as well, I would say. Again, most of these cloud solutions they're commercial operators, and they have a business perspective that differs from a government archive or a public archive. So these are the reasons that we decided not to work with cloud solutions and build our own digital storage solutions, which comes with a cost, obviously. And you talk about, in our case, between 500,000 and $1 million per year. But in the long run, also given the fact that we are a government agency and a government archive, we think from a trust perspective, it's better.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Ale Raza. Thank you very much, Mr. Jan Muller. Thank you very much, Mr. Adrian Wood. It was indeed an information-packed session, and after looking at the chat and the discussion and the feedback, I think everyone enjoyed this thing. And the thing is that, just a moment. All right. So we will be definitely having a part 2 and part 3 of this kind of thing. Maybe we can have some workshop, which we will be announcing really soon. So do stay connected with us on our Facebook. But before that, I would like to invite Miss Philomena, Director AIBD, again to unmute her mic and say some remarks, and then we will have a group photo. So by then, just turn on your webcam so we can have a pretty group photo.
Okay.
Ms. Philomena.
Right. Thank you, Nabil, and thank you to all our panelists. I think it's a fantastic session because I'm actually monitoring all the chats and the Q&A and also on Facebook. So I noticed that there are so many questions. I expected this to be a very technical thing, but it has come out as a very interesting webinar because everyone's interested about how to preserve what the things that you've created, and it's very interesting sharing. So I want to say that yes, I'll echo what Nabil said. We will definitely do more of these webinars, and thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you also to the panelists.